Thank you for tuning in to Planting Seeds, Philanthropy in Saskatchewan, a podcast where we aim to connect you to the community impact that is empowered by donors and charities across the prairies. I'm your host, Victor Roman, from the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation. I hope you enjoyed the listen. Hello, I'm very happy to welcome Kaytlyn Barber to the podcast today. Kaytlyn is a partner at KPMG and leads the Saskatchewan Global Infrastructure Advisory Practice. She's also currently a board member for the Ronald McDonald House Charities Saskatchewan, a board member at the Regina Food Bank, and has been involved in a variety of other community organizations, and I think is involved with some others presently. Kaytlyn has also been recognized with various awards, including the Saskatchewan Youth Award, Cross Young Humanitarian Award, Young Philanthropist Award, and various academic scholarships. So from a young age, Kaytlyn has really been involved in philanthropy, and we're really interested to hear that perspective as she joins us today. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Kaytlyn.
Thanks, Victor.
So is there anything else you'd want to elaborate on your current or previous roles, things you do in the community, work-wise, anything like that?
I think maybe just an important perspective piece to layer in addition to the intro that you provided, is I'm one of 7 kids and have a really large extended family too. And I think as we talk today about philanthropy and about giving back, I would say that that's significantly influenced a lot of the activities over my entire life. Just that whole concept of giving back being modeled as core to what you do day to day. I think there's a combination of nature and nurture there. And I had the opportunity for a whole heck of a lot of nurture. And so I think that's just another key piece that underlies lots of the conversation we're going to be having today.
That's great. And I guess that makes sense because, when you're a young philanthropist, even the word philanthropy, I don't think a lot of kids are necessarily thinking about. So, and we're so easily influenced by, the adults in our lives, and usually our families. So what is your family background with philanthropy? Like, how did you get introduced to it as a kid and decide this is something that I want to do? This is how I can be involved in the community as well.
So it's probably fair to say that there's a foundation of philanthropy far before even my memory starts. But I think where philanthropy was kind of more self-directed and independent in nature, so certainly growing up involved in countless different fundraisers, initiatives, community activities, but where it was more about me driving it as opposed to participating, I think really started in school, and in particular in my later years of elementary school, where a lot of the core components that they referred to in a lot of the activities around leadership, for me, meant community-based leadership, meant giving back, meant looking for opportunities for how we raise money, drive impact, support others. And so for me, I think it really started in those leadership activities in elementary school, and then has since carried on as a core component of all aspects of my life all the way to today. What I've been involved with is pretty varied, everything from, selling chocolate bars in magazines and organizing the chocolate bar and magazine sales to gala dinners that raised tens of thousands of dollars, to contributions today as a board member and other roles within various organizations. And so for me, interestingly, a lot of my experience with philanthropy crosses a number of different kind of, I would say, end organizations. So part of my affiliations have been with organizations and associations, but from a philanthropy perspective, even some of those in terms of where they contribute to as the final organization has been totally varied. Everything from health-related organizations, community facilities, events, activities, children's causes are really important to me increasingly now. Educational-related causes, especially through the higher education system. And so for me, it hasn't been kind of just one sector, one type. I've really had the opportunity to be exposed and participate across a range of different causes and organizations.
So I mean, the children run, I know you talked about being a mother to some young children. So that one, it's pretty natural, I think, to understand that background. But just overall, when you are looking at doing different activities and ways to give back, but also where to give back, what does drive the types of places, the types of causes you do give back to, especially because it's varied? Like, what's the process you go through to think this is how I want to help community, or this is a cause that I think I could be, I could contribute to?
So the challenging piece, and I'm sure you and others have experienced this, is there's so many amazing causes. There's so many places I'd love to give time, talent, energy, resources. And so it's more about how do you prioritize that? And for me, it's been two main pieces. And the first and foremost being, I'm the kind of person that always has a lot on the go. And so time is really valuable. And so for me, it's where do I feel as though my time and effort would achieve the greatest impact? So I really love and am passionate about causes where I feel as though I can add the most value. And I'm at a place in my life where most value doesn't always mean dollars and cents. I give where I can, when I can, how I can. But I think my history with philanthropy has been more about how I give time and talents and how I build connections. And so that's first and foremost, is how can I get the most value out of the time that I have? And the second is that the cause has to have personal meaning and value to me. If I feel as though I'm having impact, then I'm going to really be engaged. As soon as I feel as though my time could be better invested elsewhere, then it's time to leave that opportunity or leave that cause for someone better positioned to really take that up and drive that impact. So those would be the two main factors for me, Victor, of how I choose and how my contributions have evolved over time. And I've learned a lot along the way. So what causes I'm going to get involved with next, I don't know for sure. But I'm lucky that I've had so many amazing opportunities that it's more about being picky and choosy than about trying to figure out what's next.
That's good to know. One thing that you kind of touched on it here, and this is something we talked about ahead of time when we were talking about doing this podcast. And you said something really interesting, kind of along the lines of, there's many ways to be a philanthropist, and it's not always opening up your wallet. And that I think you said you have a lot of experience where it's not just opening up your wallet. And I imagine if you started this as a teenager, you're probably not looking at opening up a huge wallet either. So what are some of the ways that people who are, thinking about giving back can give back based on your experience?
Yeah, I think that it's about finding the right fit, Victor, that sometimes the more straightforward or simple way is giving cash or giving dollars, but there's so much more that an organization needs than simply dollars. And I think a few of the key ways where I would say I've been fortunate to be a philanthropist without necessarily giving or contributing significant dollars. First, I think that there's always a need for giving time and energy. And different people at different stages of their life have the ability to give time. And I think when I look at my experience, especially during elementary school, high school, university, one of the really big things that I had was flexibility and time. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? That means helping to actually coordinate and organize the events. That means being willing to help pick up the phone and make phone calls. So many charities and organizations need that. It meant, I think another big piece is being thoughtful and asking the question of, what do you need most? And I'll do that. So it's being open to kind of taking on things that maybe you don't know for sure what it's going to be. So that would be kind of the volunteer front. I think the other big piece that for me, philanthropy has meant, and it's the nature and core to kind of giving, is even when you're young, or even if you don't have dollars to give, you tend to have relationships networks, colleagues, friends. And so I think in a really important role is being an ambassador for some of those organizations and building awareness in that way. And so you don't necessarily need dollars for that, and you can do it in different ways with your time. But I think being an ambassador, being an advocate, communicating the messages for some of those organizations or causes that you're really passionate about really then drives donor activity. It drives new programs. It drives new conversations. And I would say those are two really tangible ways that anyone and everyone could be a philanthropist.
That advocacy piece is really important too, and that was something that I talked to Melissa Cooper Benson from the YWCA on this podcast earlier in the year, and one of the things they said was that they call it super fans, and how do we create super fans? And the one thing that we really witnessed, when the pandemic hit in 2020, and organizations were scrambling for funds, that advocacy, that ambassador piece became huge, because the more known as important that your nonprofit was in the community, the more likely you were to get that support that everybody needed at that time. So that advocacy piece really can't be downplayed as something, even if it's, at the moment it means getting a couple more volunteers when it comes to dire needs or some unexpected kind of situation like everybody saw a couple of years ago. That piece is huge for when people are saying, okay, now I know everyone needs money. Where should it go? Who can we support? This is an organization I know has that reputation. So that piece is huge for sure.
And Victor, I think one of the important pieces on that is the way that you choose to advocate or choose to be ambassador of that organization. It's evolved so quickly over time. I am terrible at social media. Like, I'm not the kind of person where you're like, oh, Kaytlyn's a social media influencer because she posts all this stuff. Not my area of expertise, not my passion, not where I choose to invest my time. There's other people far better at that than I am. I think that's a piece to recognize and acknowledge, is that to be an advocate doesn't mean that it has to be direct and forward and feel like it's in your face. Like, it's not about selling. That's not what you're doing as an advocate. It's about communicating new ideas, starting conversations, building interest. And you can do that in any way that's comfortable for you. I love talking to people. I am a total extrovert. Put me in a room, let me talk for a night. I am the happiest person. Put me behind a screen, like today, a little bit less comfortable. I can do it, but not where I'm best. And so back to my previous, where do I choose? I choose where I can add the most value. And so opportunities like that, where I'm in a room for other purposes, and all of a sudden I can weave in something that's important, something that's interesting, something that I'm passionate about. That to me is how I can be the best advocate. Somebody else that can do it on Instagram, amazing. You're wonderful. I'm not that person. That's okay.
Yeah. You're the one-to-one contact or the group contact, which is great. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of what you had told us before is that you've been involved a lot, not in promoting fundraising and helping organizations fundraise. One of the things we just recently got results back from a charity survey, and one of the things that's really apparent is that coming out of the pandemic still, plus 2022 just being a pretty wild year of inflation and people not having the same money that they maybe did, so people not sure to donate for sure where they might have before, is seeing an impact on charities. So when it comes to fundraising and really driving that, what are some ways you've maybe been successful in the past, or do you have any thoughts of what could be working right now at a time when we know organizations are really struggling to fundraise?
So I can't claim to be independent on all this. I've been so fortunate to be involved with some amazing organizations, part of teams that have done really, really interesting things. I think current, if I focus on the last year, I'm super fortunate to be on the board of the Regina Food Bank. And I think that our team at the food bank have been doing some incredibly innovative, thoughtful, and differentiated fundraising activities. that have set them apart from some of the other opportunities to give, and have supported what we've seen as a food bank organization dramatically increased demand, coupled with increased costs, coupled with a need to completely change the service delivery model seemingly overnight. And so things like what they're doing around connecting directly with farmers to get donation of grains. And then we've been, I shouldn't say we, the team, I get to sit at the sidelines and cheer them on as a board member, but the team has been able to basically facilitate the entire value chain to change the way that the food is provided, saving us tons of money and thinking differently about what giving looks like. And so I think that is one example. And that's one of those examples where you don't have to have dollars and cents to give. You can have other goods, products, services, skills, and be a philanthropist. Because what that does, if I use the food bank example, is because we can generate or get food in different ways, we now release dollars that otherwise we needed to recruit donors to give us dollars to fund other activities. And so I think that's a really interesting one. Other examples of interesting pieces during the pandemic, I think, has been typically donor and giving is so relationship-based, communication-based. So you're out meeting, you're talking. I think that the way people consume information, learn about different causes, and engage changed during the pandemic. I think in some ways people have thought differently about how they choose to drive impact. And what we've seen is that shift from where we were before, which was really event-based fundraising, to now thinking about relationships, causes, and annual giving opportunities. And I think it's really positive. I think from a charity organization, events bring a lot of cost and a lot of risk that you can reallocate that effort, that cost directly to impact if you can give in other ways. And so I think another big piece has been some of the organizations I've been a part of that have really been able to maximize the way that they distribute information, as well as then convert or engage those monthly and annual donors to contribute over time.
The efficiencies of a charity, definitely. I think a lot of what you talked to there was about figuring out ways to be efficient, knowing, the funding can't be expected what it is and the demand is getting higher. So you really have no choice but to figure out how to be efficient. And the event side of things is a huge one because, when you look at renting out a big venue, bringing in meals for people, potentially having to pay for a keynote speaker, that sort of thing, it does add up quick. And I know both personally and from talking to other charities at the time that the pandemic hit, is that was one of the big things, was that like fall 2020. It was just that whole what's going to happen in 3 months? Like, do we actually go reserve this venue? Should we sign this contract, in March for something that maybe won't happen in October? And if it happens, will anybody even show up? Will we have to cancel at last minute? That sort of thing. And it's been nice to see that shift in the community, not only by charities, but as you say, a lot of donors, I think, are more willing to evolve as well. And from a lot of organizations I've heard, especially when it comes to people that have, given long-term support to previous events, often seem to not have any issue moving into the new ideas. And I really like that, that we've seen that a lot in our community, and I hope that continues. And the one thing that's just kind of striking me as you're talking here, because even in my head, when I think about volunteer or donating, the two things that always come to my mind is you can be on a board, you can be an actual boots on the ground volunteer, or you can give money, or a combination of those things. But there are certain skills even that you're mentioning, if you are someone that's looking at, how can I give back in a way that's meaningful and goes beyond just dollars. It's if you're someone that has experience like working with businesses and figuring out efficiencies, it's like, that's something charities need. Charities need someone to go in there and do an audit and say, okay, this is where you could be saving money. Like that alone is going to actually, in a sense, give them a bunch of funding that they didn't know they could have just based on, maybe the bloating that they have within their organization or something like that. So it really is neat to see just, I guess, the different layers that you can actually go into volunteering. You can go into helping people, and you can find ways to help them find money in other ways.
I would say, Victor, kind of five areas that I think of are time, talent, things I'm really good at, skills, resources, and relationships. Any of those things, to the extent that you have them, can be amazing contributions to a cause or to an organization and have a huge impact.
That's a perfect summary of all the columns. If you're looking to give back, here's exactly how you can, and see what an organization needs. That's good. One other thing I just wanted to ask, I guess, is you've obviously done a lot in the community. You're involved with a lot of organizations. We've talked a lot about the behind the scenes, the process of helping the organization. Do you have any stories of seeing the impact and what that's meant to you? And I'm sure we can tell many stories, and we have time to tell a few for sure. So is there anything that really sticks out right away? Something that really tugged on your heart?
Yeah. So one story that comes to mind, I've had the opportunity to be involved with the Canadian Red Cross in a lot of different capacities over a very long time. And when there was major evacuations that happened, I had the pleasure of volunteering to support the evacuation center in Regina. And to the point that my employment relationship said, yep, take the time you need, make it work, figure it out. I'm so fortunate to work at KPMG. But the biggest piece was, so what I ended up getting tasked with was organizing some of the recreation activities. There was tons of kids at the shelter, and with nothing to do, they needed to be stimulated. They needed engagement. We had amazing partners in the city of Regina and others, that the library system, that were planning events, planning activities, things like that. But one thing that really kind of stands out is, at the time, the riders stepped up with hundreds of tickets for those at the shelter to attend a rider game. Organizing it behind the scenes, a lot of work. I remember, like, the day before, the night before, figuring out how we're going to get these tickets to everybody, how we're going to get them from the shelter to the rider game back, like, logistically. I was feeling the pressure. It was like, my goodness, this is absolute chaos. And I remember being at the shelter after the game and speaking to someone that was there, and they came over to me and said they were an elder, and they were, who knows how old, but later in their life, and said, I never thought I would have the opportunity to watch a Rough Rider game without commercials. That was amazing. And to this day, that still sits with me, that for me, it was like, oh man, how we're going to make this work. But the impact of that activity, that gesture, to be able to step back from what was an incredibly stressful time in their life that no one would ever want to relive, to be able to provide an opportunity because of my time and talent in terms of organizing, to be able to have that impact, to me still to this day is like, okay, how can I find ways to invest my energy to having that kind of impact on one person, one family, many people, many families.
That's incredible. And yeah, like in a time like that, even just that one evening of reprieve means the world when you've got so many things to be stressed about. So is there anything else that you've experienced? I think we've got time for about one more story before we go.
Oh, what's another good story that has been a lot about impact? I think another one would be I have only recently started to be involved with the Ronald McDonald House Charities.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of every board meeting that we start with, the leadership team has basically grounded that we do a mission moment. And every time Tammy comes on the line and shares the impact or stories that are happening in the house. And so every month that I attend a board meeting, I get to hear about kind of the key impact and the key activities. And very recently, we got a story from the team, just a direct thanks to the board for the staff who have been working tirelessly for such an extended period of time, given the connection to healthcare and what we've experienced during the pandemic. They've really been going over and above to try and figure out ways to ensure that families still felt welcome and safe in a time when they needed it most. And so we very recently got some pretty special thanks from a few staff members, just acknowledging thanks for the board's steady hand in supporting and guiding the staff team. And so I think another reminder that sometimes ways of giving back look different, but they can have just as much impact. And so that would be another recent story that comes to mind.
That's great. Well, it's nice that you've got that involvement and you're able to engage with those stories often. I know that's one privilege I have in my role is with SSEF. I get to read all the final reports. I get to reach out to charities and ask them about what happened. And for me, it's just like a dream. Like I just get to hear people doing great work in the community. And, you know, we live in an age where if you mentioned you're not really on social media much.
I'm there, but
you're there, but you don't really engage with it. It's so easy to accidentally hit something there. And it's just, you know, the news can be very sad sometimes. So it's nice to be able to see that behind the scenes of like, no, people are working towards the good. There's tons of good that's happening. Of course, it's challenging, but sometimes you need those stories. You need that little push to remind yourself that, you know, the world is good. It can be good, and we should work to make it better. I'm going to leave you with, I guess I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit. You know, you've been involved in philanthropy for probably the majority of your life. And I'm just wondering if you can leave our audience with, you know, just a call to action of why they should get involved, ways they should get involved. Just give someone a push of, you know, it's 2022, things are tough. How can you be involved?
Yeah, I think philanthropy is about not being selfish, but I think selfishly, what you get back by giving is so much greater than what you put in. And so I think that there's a couple things. First, I wouldn't tell anybody or ask them that they need to get involved. I would invite them. Here's your opportunity to learn new skills, have phenomenal experiences, gain new relationships and friendships. I invite you to participate. And I would encourage others to do the same, that it's not about a must do or a have to do, it's about an opportunity. And I think the other piece is that for better or worse, I think one of the first pieces is there has to be something in it for you. And that doesn't mean a direct impact. It can be, as I mentioned earlier, new skill, new friendship, new experience. And what you'll quickly realize is that it might feel as though it's for you to start with, but that's going to build a new momentum across the board of doing amazing things. And I think, Victor, part of the reason that I'm at KPMG and continue to be at KPMG today is one of the core performance expectations of every team member is actually that they're involved in the community. And we're evaluated on that in our performance review every year. It's not an encouragement, it's an expectation. And it's been so fascinating to see mentoring and coaching my team and other colleagues, just the value that they've generated and how it's impacted both their professional career as well as their personal life in starting to more actively participate in the community, give back, volunteer, whatever that looks like for them. And so I think that's a big thing, is you just have to start. Just try one thing and see where you land.
That would be a perfect ending, but I'm actually going to extend it with one more question because you brought up KPMG, and the importance of corporate giving isn't always so obvious to people, or the social responsibility portion of a business. And can you just maybe tell a bit about, how does KPMG go about getting employees engaged and involved in the community? Like, is it something you do during work hours, or what does that look like?
So, Victor, I think one of the things that I particularly like about KPMG's approach is it's not just one thing; it's pretty varied. And so, as an organization, it's everything from, as you mentioned, some of the specific corporate giving activities. KPMG contributes to a very wide range of causes across the country, around the world, as well as across different sectors, if I may, or different causes. But the other piece in terms of how do you engage the team in those activities. So part of it is that we do formal corporate activities where the whole team comes together and we do a day of giving and volunteer together. But I think for me, the piece that I find most interesting is that KPMG also has a wealth of resources and a commitment across the team to help facilitate opportunities that align with an individual's passion or values. And so there's no waiting on whether you're involved as a member of your church, whether you're involved as a member of a community association, or whether you're involved as a volunteer at the hospital. There's no better or worse. They're all wonderful opportunities. And so anything that a team member wants to do, there's a support network to do it. And there's also a commitment across the team to help facilitate those opportunities. So for example, in my conversations with the team members that I coach, the question is, well, what do you want to do? What are you really passionate about? What are you excited about? And they might say, I really want to get involved in who knows what, right? Pick a cause. But I don't know anyone and I don't know where to start. That's where the power of the network and the power of our colleagues can come together. And I say, do you know what? I know this person. Let's get you to call them. We'll make it happen. We'll see where we land. And anytime that that's happened, it's evolved into something that's been really meaningful for that person. And so I think it's, Victor, that combination of there's corporate giving from a dollars perspective, from a time perspective, but there's also that professional coaching, mentoring within your organization and outside of your organization for personal passion.
That's great. I mean, that's such a huge part of loving your job. Everyone has different passions, but I've definitely witnessed as well. I guess one thing I can say anecdotally is I remember one of my favorite jobs I ever had was only for 6 months. And I bonded with people. That was probably a decade ago at this point. And I still connect with people there. And I was barely at the job, but it was because there was such a strong tie to giving back to community. And there were so many opportunities to do so that it's just, you naturally bond with the people around you. So as you kind of mentioned at KPMG, it's key to, you have better workers when they come in, and everybody really not only believes in what they're doing at work, but knows that work believes in what they care about outside of work. So it's huge.
And full support, formal and informal, for them to be making those investments.
Yes. Well, thanks a lot. That was really, really good. And I think we've got a lot of really good points that people are going to be able to pick out from this. So I appreciate your time today. I know you're pretty busy, so I always appreciate when you find a little gap in there that can work for this. Yeah,
I think you missed in my intro that I work for 2 Under 2, and I just happen to be a partner at KPMG on the side.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. When you've got little kids like that, they're the ones that you really work for. That's true. All right. Well, thanks a lot, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you for listening today. If you'd like to learn more, visit South Saskatchewan Community Foundation at sscf.ca or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Just search South Saskatchewan Community Foundation. And of course, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're tuning in from.